Okay, so as we look at this chapter right now, I always want to focus in on the big idea. So if you get anything from this message, get the big idea. And initially, it might be kind of hard to put together, and it might be something that we have to work through so it becomes clear as we go. But the big idea is guilt or grief can blind you to God's provision. In other words, God can be blessing you sometimes, showing you grace. And if you have things that you feel guilty about in your life, or if you have grief, sometimes you cannot see God's blessing. And so as we go through this today, I'm just really focusing on that aspect of it, because you're going to see this contrast with the brothers and with Jacob himself and God's provision. So with that said, we already read this, but I'm going to go ahead and recap some of it. Okay, so there's a famine. Your family is starving. What are you supposed to do? Go get some food, right? And so Jacob says, he saw that there was grain in Egypt, and Jacob said to his sons, and those of you who have sons and parents, think about this. Why are you staring at one another? Which is code for do something. He said, behold, I have heard that there is grain in Egypt, so go up there and buy some for us in that place so that we may live and not die. The 10 brothers of Joseph then went down to buy grain from Egypt. So that little pep talk had to get them started. You know, the kids are going to their father and say, Dad, I'm really hungry. We don't have anything to eat, you know. And what do we do? What do? We just stare at each other. Okay. So the interesting part about this is that it says, but Jacob did not send Joseph's brother Benjamin, because he said, I am afraid that harm may befall him. So they go down to buy some grain here, and that is going to be seemingly the mission, the whole rest of this chapter right here. But this story really isn't about food. It's a story where people will do and what they will finally admit when their survival is on the line. You're going to see things come out of the mouths of the brothers that they probably would have never said out loud before. And so the word that's doing the work here in this particular verse right here is Jacob is saying, I am afraid that harm may befall them. Now, why do you suppose he's afraid harm might overtake Benjamin? Because of Joseph, right? But the interesting thing here is the fear that Jacob has is that the same kind of harm might happen to Benjamin. What does he think happened to Benjamin? He thinks an animal got him. Joseph, yeah, sorry. He thinks an animal has him. So that's what Jacob's thinking. So Jacob is thinking, you know what? I don't want to send him because there might be animals out there and the same thing might befall him that happened to Joseph. But what's the biggest danger there? Is the biggest danger the anger of the animals? It's the brothers. And so here you have an example of that Jacob is completely oblivious to this. He's concerned about the animal attack. And I wouldn't want to see the same thing happen there. So he thinks that he's protecting his son. He's protecting his family. But he has no idea that his family has been broken for over 2 decades now. So that's how scene 1 starts off. Go get some grain, quit staring at each other. And for those of you that have the fill-ins right here, it says, guarding the wrong son. So Jacob is terrified something will harm Benjamin. He already believes something harmed Joseph, but the real threat walked out of his tent 22 years ago. The real threat being his brothers. It wasn't an animal. It was his own sons. So that's where we're going here, okay? And as we continue this, there's going to be the face-to-face encounter that we've all been waiting for. What's going to happen if the brothers run into Joseph? Now, Joseph was ruler over the land, and he was the one who sold to all the people of the land, and Joseph's brothers came, and what do, folks? They bow down to him with their faces to the ground. But Joseph had recognized his brothers, although they did not recognize him. So stop. 10 grown men are now bowing down, facing the ground. It's the exact posture from a dream that Joseph had as a 17-year-old child. He once told his brothers in a dream, sheaves in the field, your sheaves were bowing down to my sheep. And they hated him for it. Are we going to bow down to you? Do you really think that's going to be happening? And so that issue was so insulting to them that it was part of the reason why they chose to sell him to the slaves in Egypt to begin with. Let's see us bowing down to you now. But God can do that. And that's the weird thing, is sometimes you think you're putting out a fire. You have this plan that what you think can possibly happen, there's no way it's going to happen again. And I'm sure when they sent him out and they had actually they were the sons of Abraham, the Ishmaelites and the Medites, and anyway. But what just happened here? His dream came true. His dream came true. And they looked at him. They had no idea who he was. But he recognized them immediately. And so you can feel this tension that's happening here. How is this going to play out right now? Joseph, what does he do? He remembered the dreams which he had about them. It was like instantly brought up, right? He sees these brothers prostrating themselves before him. It's exactly like the dream. And he says to them, you are spies. You have come to look out the undefended parts of our land. In other words, you're looking to attack us. You're kind of surveying the scene, assessing how strong our military is. You're spies. I could just see it in you. And they said to him, no, my Lord, but your servants have come to buy food. And then, this is the humorous part. Has Joseph pressured them to share their whole story? If you were in this situation, would you share the things you've never spoken about? Or would you just say, we didn't come here to spy? But it says, they all said it in unison. We are all sons of one man. And I love this line. We are honest men. Your servants are not spies. Man, this is just one of those fulfillments that happens where the people don't even recognize it that are fulfilling it. Like they had no idea that they were fulfilling Joseph's dreams right before him. But it even gets worse because there's a conversation that's going to happen and go on from here. We'll look at that here. Yet he said to them, no, but you have come to look at the undefended parts of our land. But they said, your servants are 12 brothers in all. Okay? Anybody hear of TMI? Is this TMI? Too much information, right? Your servants are 12 brothers in all. Just in case you know, even though you only see 10, there's 2 more of us. The sons of one man in Canaan, and behold, the youngest is with his father today, and drum roll here. And one is no longer alive. Wouldn't you like to be a fly on the wall here? I mean, did Joseph ask him for any of that information? No. But there's something about when the pressure is on and you see yourself in this dire circumstance where if you've been holding guilt in, it just resurfaces sometimes. And sometimes it's not even with a coherent thought right now. But can you imagine hearing, if you're Joseph, them retell your story that caused you pain, that caused you prison time, that made you have to change who you are, and they think he's dead? The men are standing 3 feet away, and Joseph holds the power to give them life or death. It is, without question, one of the most staggering ironies in the entire book of Genesis. Why do the brothers give too much information? Why do they put their family in jeopardy? Why do they admit to this person, one is not with us anymore? And the story, it just continues to build here. You're thinking about this from Joseph's perspective. So, recap, fill in people. The dream has been fulfilled that he gave as a 17-year-old child. 22 years ago, it just came true. Which tells us what practically? Sometimes your dreams come true, but it doesn't happen as fast as you'd like them to happen. But the whole course of his term in Egypt has prepared him for where he's at right now. He was an overseer of Potiphar's house. Then he was falsely accused by Potiphar's wife, and then he became an overseer in the prison. He interpreted the dreams of the cupbearer and the baker. They forgot about him for 2 years, and then Pharaoh had a dream, And then the cupbearer said, oh yeah, that's right. He said I was going to live and the other guy was going to die. Like, God's working behind the scenes. It's like a confluence. Have you heard of a confluence? Where two rivers, they run together. It's like this is God's will and this is the individual will, and all of a sudden there's a confluence happening here. And that's what you're seeing right here. So they are describing Joseph's death to Joseph. How would you feel about that? Think about that. How would you feel? The brothers that betrayed you, they just retold this story that you never asked to be retold. The man they declared dead is standing 3 feet away from them, and their fate is in his hands. And then comes the test. I call it the honesty test. Because what did they claim? We are what? Honest men. Before we even get started there, would you guys agree that the brothers have been honest men throughout their lives? Is that a lie? Do you think Joseph would know that the answer to that we're honest men? It's like it's the last person you want to tell him that. Yeah, except for when it comes to you. All right, so let's go here. Okay, so Joseph puts them in prison for 3 days. And 3 days is significant because the last time Joseph was in prison, there came the cupbearer and the baker. And, they had the dream, and so Joseph had to interpret the dream, and he basically said, in 3 days, this is going to be your fate, and this is going to be your fate, okay? So there's kind of like an irony that's going on behind the scene here. So they're in prison for 3 days, and Joseph said to them on the 3rd day, do this and live, for I fear God. If, it's a big word, right, for them, if you are honest men, let one of your brothers be confined in your prison. But for the rest of you, go carry grain for the famine for your households. And bring your youngest brother to me, so that your words may be verified. And you will not die. And they did so. Why is he seemingly enamored with the younger brother? What's that? He's the youngest brother, but there's even that's true, but there's even something more that's connecting. Same mother. Same mother had 2 children, Joseph and Benjamin. Okay? So for Joseph, obviously he cares about this Benjamin, and maybe he's even suspicious, well, why isn't he here? Did something happen to him like what happened to me? It's carefully thought out, and it's weaved together like this. So he says, if you're honest brothers, let one of you sacrifice. Let one of you sacrifice and be in jail. Go to the pit. Is there anybody here besides the Simeon here that's been in the pit before? When his brothers left and went home. It's Joseph. So Joseph is telling them, he's setting this up to kind of follow exactly what happened to him. So one of the brothers stays there, It says, and bring your youngest brother so that your words may be verified and you shall not die. So it says, and they did so. So the story continues to just develop right here. And then they started to talk to one another. Okay? Have you ever been in an environment where maybe you're at the fair and you're talking to somebody and then some other people come beside you and they're speaking a different language? That's kind of weird sometimes, because sometimes I wonder what they're talking about. And sometimes you even think to yourself, I wish they would speak in English. Don't lie. Some of you say that. But anyway, what I'm pointing out here is they're talking to each other. What language do the brothers speak? Hebrew, right? So they're talking to each other, and someone just happens to be there. This is great. It says they're talking to each other and they're saying, imagine this, truly we are guilty concerning our brother because we saw the distress of his soul when he pleaded with us, and we would not listen. Therefore this distress has come upon us. Do you see what guilt can make you do? It can make you have these conversations probably not in the best appropriate place. But there's a guilt thing. If anything is going to happen to these guys where they feel like their life is being threatened or things aren't going well, they're going to keep thinking, God is doing this to me because of what I did. And there are a lot of people that believe that today, that God is punishing me for some decision that I made 10, 15, 20 years ago. It happens. It says, they did not know, however, that Joseph understood, because Joseph speaks what? Hebrew. Okay? For there was an interpreter between them. And so now you can see what's going on here in this scene is that Joseph is speaking in Egyptian, and there's an interpreter there that knows Hebrew. And anyway, it's one of these things that it's an irony again. It's like they don't think Joseph knows what they're talking about. It's just like when you're in line somewhere and people start using different language and they're like, oh, they don't know what I'm talking about. And they can get loud, and sometimes people are really loud speaking different languages. At the Grand Canyon, man, it happened every time. I'm like, where are you from? France. Where are you from? Greece. Because they're speaking different language. But anyway, there's an interpreter between them. They think Joseph can't understand them. And what did they say? We are guilty concerning our brother because we saw his distress of his soul. I mean, that's like deep. When he pleaded with us and we would not listen. And so how would that affect you if you overheard that and you were Joseph? It says, he turned away from them and wept. Because some things don't just go away. Sometimes you think it's dealt with, you think the pain is gone, but then the pain can just come welling back up. So he turns away from them and he wept. And then he puts on his disguise again. And he returns to them and he speaks to them, and he took Simeon from them and bound him before their eyes. So the test has to be complete, even though this is the first time where you feel this, that hurt. And Joseph is going to do it some more. So with scene 3, Joseph never mentioned his own name. He never told him who he is. He just applied pressure, and the guilt came up on its own. An interpreter stood between them. He understands every word, and he hears them, most importantly, he hears them confess. We did this. We're being judged for this. And he leaves the room and weeps. Friends, this is like family dynamics for some of you who've been in relationships that family members have been in feuds. This is the stuff that happens to many Christians. And the issue that really becomes apparent is this concept of forgiveness. I've seen Christians say they love Jesus, they go to church, they tithe, but there's this family member there that something happened 20 years ago and they have not spoken a word to them. And there are also times where I've done memorial services for people that force these folks to come together for someone that had passed away. And sometimes that's how God uses memorial services. And I've seen them talk for the first time in decades. And every time I hear him say, it's sad that this is the event that had to get us talking again. But God does that sometimes when someone passes, is he's still using that person to draw people together, especially if they're Christians that need to be able to forgive them like Jesus forgave. All right, scene 4. We're moving. Then Joseph gave orders to fill their bags with grain and to restore every man's money in a sack and to give them provisions for the journey. And thus it was done for them. Now, how are they going to react to this? How would you react to this? Okay? It says, and one of them opened his sack to give his donkey fodder at the lodging place, and he saw his money, and behold, it was in the mouth of his sack, right? Oh, this is the money that I gave for this grain that I have in my hand. And it says, then he said to his brothers, my money has been returned, and behold, it's in my sack. And what happens here? This is provision from God, right? What happens? And their hearts sank, and they turned trembling to one another, saying, what is this that God has done to us? Well, the answer to that question is he's just given provision. He has just given you grain, and the person that has given the grain happens to be the brother that you think is dead. And sometimes I get like a surprise. I won't mention names, but someone recently gave my wife and I a $50 gift certificate to the Fish Grill. It was a surprise. But I didn't say, God, what are you doing to me? I'm guilty. That was provision, right? God used someone to bless me. Friends, this is a blessing. But they say, God has done this to us. And then we continue on the story here. When they came to their father, this is not going to be a good conversation, right? This is not going to be a good conversation. When they came to the father in the land of Canaan, they told him all that had happened to them, saying, this man said, but bring your youngest brother to me, that I might know that you are not spies, but honest men. I will give your brother to you, and you may trade in the land. So what does Jacob think of this? God, you have blessed our family. You have allowed us to survive in this famine here. You have brought favor. No, their father Jacob said to them, you have bereaved me of my children. Joseph is no more, and Simeon is no more. And you would take Benjamin? All these things are against me. And as I was mentioning here, you have guilt that can't really see the provision. And now you have grief here. And the grief has affected the other person so much that all they can think about is the grief it's going to cause me. You've already taken my sons. Now you're going to take my youngest one too. And so as the story comes to the last part of the chapter, then Jacob said, my son shall not go down with you. For his brother is dead, and he alone is left. If harm should befall him on the journey you're taking, then you would bring my gray hair to the ground. This chapter ends at this standstill right here. Because if it's going to end like this, nothing is going to be accomplished that's positive. And so here's the beauty of this story, just kind of a preview. It's going to take one person to offer himself as a sacrifice for this transaction to be completed. And it's a man you would least expect. You know, sometimes our grief won't allow us to see provision. When I was young, my grandparents, they lived in Munich, Germany, and they spoke German. And the other set, with my father, lived in New Mexico, and they spoke Spanish. And so I was this kid, along with my brother, who never really had a conversation with my grandparents. And it was unlike all my friends. They lived in different regions, and they spoke different languages. And so when Michelle and I had kids, we said that we're going to make sure that our kids have access to their grandparents. And so pretty much every year we go to Minnesota for Christmas, and we went on Thanksgiving all the time to visit my mom. And there was a time where Coastal Community Fellowship was looking for a pastor, and they thought that I might be a good fit. But I knew in my heart that I was not going to move to California, because if I did, it would prevent my children from having access to their grandma. I lived in Oregon, she lived in Washington. It's an easy drive. Well, we were going to go up there for Thanksgiving, as we usually did. My mom passed away the day before Thanksgiving in 2011. And it was grief. I lost my father when I was 7, and I lost my mom. I couldn't think about the church. I knew in my heart that I wasn't going to go here because I did not want that happen to them that happened to me. And then I prayed. And then the church contacted me and they said they had 2 people from the pulpit committee say they were going to drive to Portland and they were going to go through Albany, where we were living at the time, by Corvallis. And they said, "Can we stop by?" And I told them, because I was taking care of Corbin as well, I said, "Hey, if you can get here between 12 to 3 or 1 to 3, because that's when I put my kid down. They're coming from Fountain Valley, driving. I see a car pulled up at my house like at 12:50. And I still couldn't see it. I couldn't see the provision that God was giving me because of the grief. And so eventually they came and I kind of went through the motions and they left, and then the pulpit committee started to express more interest in me, and we had to pray about it and realize that my mom's death, although I didn't like it, allowed me to be able to explore the opportunity in Fountain Valley. And that's what I did. And now I can see all the years just the provision that God blessed me with. But sometimes you can't see that because you're so locked into grief. Sometimes God is trying to show you that. So friends, as we, this is for the fill-in people again. Feel free to put that in if you don't have it. But I'm going to transition to the close here. Undeserved kindness terrified the brothers because of guilt. And grace can feel the same way to you if you're carrying something. And sometimes you don't even know you're carrying it until you're put in a pressure kind of situation. But then there's God the Father and Jesus. He already knows everything that you have ever done in your life. Even the secrets of your heart, it says in Romans, that you don't tell anybody, you don't do what the brothers did. He knows the secrets of your heart. And yet he died for you. He paid the price for you. And so as we take communion today, this is a reminder to you that no matter what you've done in your life, Jesus paid the price for you. The bread represents his body, which was broken for you on the cross, beaten, tortured, flogged. He gladly took it because he was thinking of you. And then he took the cup and he said, this represents the new covenant, the blood, forgiveness of sins. He does that to remind us, because we need reminders. Do this as often as you will. And so I just want to say, if there's somebody in here that is burdened with guilt or with grief, here is provision for you. You might not have all the answers right now. Because of what Jesus did, if you put your faith in him, you're going to find out how God, just like in this story, just wove things together and was giving you provision all along. And so if you're a believer in Jesus Christ, that's all that I ask. You believe that Jesus died for your sins and rose from again. You believe that in your heart. You don't care about what other people might think, but you know you have believed in him. This table's for you. You're welcome. Come partake. Because in his grief, he gave you provision. And he says, come to the table as often as you will. Let me pray.